All right, so today we are looking at notes on slope-intercept form, okay? So basically what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at slope-intercept form, whether it's given to you, whether you have to come up with it, in a couple different ways, but the end goals are going to be some of these things. One, we're going to want to be able to graph linear functions. And two, we're going to want to be able to write a equation in linear slope form, okay, or excuse me, slope-intercept form. So I'm going to start with talking about what slope-intercept form looks like. And I'm actually going to give you that formula up top. And we've kind of talked about this before. I know you've seen this before. But in slope-intercept form, it is y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. Okay, now the things to take away, remember the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, on Friday we talked about x-intercept and y-intercept. X-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis, y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. Slope is going to be that change, because that's also what we talked about. Slope is that change from one point to another. So remember Friday, you were given graphs where you had to find it. You were given equations. You were given tables, okay? Now we're going to look at how we graph things and go through it from here or there. All right, so we've got a couple different examples to start with. And the directions here, they ask you to sketch a graph of each line. So right now, all we're worried about is graphing this actual equation. Y'all with me? Okay. So look in here. In this first example, you should notice that they give you an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Well, those points are simply going to be where it crosses the x or the y-axis. Okay. So the x-intercept is 3. That means you will have a dot at x is 3. Everybody okay with why my dot goes there? X-axis is horizontal. It goes left and right. The y-intercept is at -1. So I want to put a dot at -1 where the graph is going up and down. Okay? Now, here's as simple as it is. To get this last few things, all you've got to do is connect those dots. Okay? So you're going to be here. And all you would do there is just take this and connect a dot through it. Now, your line should probably look better than mine. You want to use a straight edge if needed to connect it. But when they ask you to do it, all you need is 2 points to connect, and that is enough to make your line. Now, I'm not going to be very stingy and take off points if your line just looks absolutely awful. But you should have a straight edge that you can use to really kind of help you out with that connection. Everybody with me? All right. Okay, so that's what happens when they give you intercepts. Okay, now, a special one is like the one on number 2. On number 2, it says y is equal to -4. Here's what you've got to remember. There's 2 things. We talked about on Friday when you had y was equal to just a number. Well, that's going to be a horizontal line. It's going to be a slope of 0. Okay, that means it won't go up, it won't go down, it's just going to be flat. Here's the easiest way to remember it. If it's y is equal to a number, then your line has to go through where y equals that number. Well, y equals -4 down here, so your graph just simply has to be a horizontal line that goes through that, making your graph look just like that. You've got to talk to me. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Now, vice versa, you don't see one. Let me double check. Yeah, we're not going to see one on here. But if it was x was equal to something, what kind of line would it be? Vertical. And it would go through wherever x equals that number. Okay. Perfect. All right. Let's come down here and look at number 3. Okay. Number 3 is one where you already have it in slope-intercept form, okay? Why it is in slope-intercept form, it's y is equal to some number times x, then plus or minus another number. You have to have it in slope-intercept form to be able to graph it, If it is in standard form, you cannot graph it. It's got to be in slope-intercept form. So here you look at this. Here are the two things that you are going to need. You are going to need your slope, and you are going to need your y-intercept. Okay? Now, the cool thing is your slope is simply the number in front of x. Your y-intercept is simply the number at the end. So, the y-intercept is typically the easiest one to get. What is the y-intercept here? -5. Not 5, -5. The sign in front of it matters, okay? So, what that tells us is we can go ahead and plot our y-intercept. It is down here at -5. Everybody okay with that? All right. Now, the next part can be easy, but there is a little trick. What is the slope here? -1/2. Now, here's the part that students really struggle with. It's -1/2. Does that negative go to both the top and the bottom number? Does it go to one of them? How does it happen? How does it work? Here's what you need to think. The negative is not going to go to both top and bottom. It will go to one or the other. So, a little side note here, that means your slope is either -1/2 or it is +1/2. Now, that matters a whole lot because to figure out how this graph is going to look, you've actually got to take your slope and count it. And the thing to remember with slope, your slope is always rise over run. So, if I was going to graph this, all right, I've got two different ways I can do this. Do you want me to do -1/2 or do you want me to do +1/2? -1/2. So if I did -1/2, my top number is what? Negative. So I'm not going to go up, I would go down. So I would go down 1, but then I need to go 2 in the positive direction. That is 2 right, so it would be over 1, 2. And my dot would go right here. So just to show you, it would be down 1 over 1, 2. That is where my dot would go. Now, that is enough right here to go ahead and connect your line and do it. Y'all with me? I typically don't do that. I like to get as many points as possible just because it makes it easier to draw my line. The other way I could have done this was done +1 over -2. The difference there is, if I have +1, I would go up 1, but then I would go the left 2, which would give me that point. And here's the cool thing about slope. Once you get to your next point, you can count and continue to do the same thing. And notice what I created. With those longer lines, or those more dots, I've created an easier way to draw and connect my line. Are there any questions on that? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Sold. All right. Well, let's go look at our last example on the front. Here, when you look at this, the thing you should notice, 2x plus y equals -4 is not in slope-intercept form. This is standard form. It is not in slope-intercept form because y is not by itself. Can we make it by itself? Yeah, we 100% can. You do that by moving that 2x. How can I move it to the other side? I subtract it. So it was a positive 2x. I need to make it a negative 2x. Now, Friday we talked about when we write this, we want to write it in a specific way, right? I always like to go y is equal to, then whatever is with the x. So what number is with x? Negative 2x. And then what do I have left over? A -4, so it would just be -4. This is in slope-intercept form. It also gives me the ability to find my slope and to find my y-intercept. What is my y-intercept here? -4, because it is always the number without it. And then my slope is my m value, which here is -2. Now, if you look at that, the thing that probably throws you off is you say, okay, well, that's cool, Coach Dasher, but that's -2. There's no rise over run. How can I make that into a fraction? Yep, it's -2 over 1. Now, is my slope negative? Yeah. So I can either think of it as -2 over +1, or what's the other way I can think of it? +2 over -1. Do y'all see how there's two different ways you can think about the slope? That helps you graph it and count it off. That's why I'm making it such a big deal. You've got to tell me if you were confused or lost on that. Does anybody have any questions? All right, well then let's come over here and graph this. I have my starting point at -4 on my y-axis. Then it's all about counting. Do you want my negative to be up top or in the bottom? Up top. So if my negative is up top, I want to count down 2. Then I would go left 1. All right, notice I put those little baby dots to help me count. I could also have gone the opposite direction. Oh, hold on, wait, I messed that up. Why didn't y'all yell at me? Yeah, hold on. So for those of you at home, I messed this up because that's the mistake you're going to make. When you go down 2, you then have to go in the positive direction, which would be right 1, not left 1. Okay? So the mistake I made is I went double negative. You can't do that. You got to go down, then right. I could have counted up and then gone left for my negative. So that would have been +2, -1. And notice how you can keep this going to just help make your line a little bit easier. And then it's just a simple connection. Questions? All right. Let's continue on. Okay. Now, here is the next thing, and here's kind of the big thing for today. Now they're going to give you a couple different scenarios where you have to write the slope-intercept form of the equation. The thing to remember, and I know I am beating a dead horse, but I want to make sure you get it. Slope-intercept form is y is equal to mx plus b. Okay? When they give you a graph, you have to find the slope, and you have to find your b value, which is the y-intercept. Well, what's the easiest one to find? Yeah, the y-intercept, because it is down here at -4. Now, when given a graph, just like we learned on Friday, so I'm giving you a refresher on this. If they give you a graph to find the slope, you have to count it. So that means I need to look up here and find another point that goes directly through a spot. Okay, so what I mean by that is like, I don't want to choose this point because it doesn't meet through a corner where it makes a nice little thing. The one that is nice is going to be this point right here at -3, 2. Okay, here is what I would do. I've got those 2 points. Now, what I'm going to do, I don't know what just happened. Now what I'm going to do is just count it. So I start down here at my bottom. To get it even, I count up 1, 2. So that is 2, but it was in the positive direction because I went up. So my rise would be +2. My run is going to go to the left. 1, 2, 3. Well, going to the left, is that the positive direction or the negative direction? Negative. So now remember my slope is rise over run. My rise here was a +2. My run here was a -3. Here is all I've got to do now. All I've got to do is take the information there and plug it in to the equation above. So I would have y is equal to negative 2 over 3. The negative's just out in front. Okay, it doesn't really matter, but it's negative because one number's negative, one number's positive. I've got an x with that, and then a minus 4 because that is my b value. And that gives me my equation in slope-intercept form. Questions? Everybody get that down? All right, let's go down here. This next one's probably the easiest one on the page. Here they ask you again to write it in slope-intercept form, and they give you the slope and they give you the y-intercept. So all that means is you've literally got to take this equation and plug it in for your pieces. Remember, the slope is m, the y-intercept is your b. So you would get y is equal to negative 4 over 5x plus 1. Was that too quick? Feeling okay? All right. Okay, let's come down here and look at number 7. Okay, so we got 3 more to look at. Number 7 on your notes right here. Now they want it in slope-intercept form, but you're given an equation. Here's the thing. To get it in slope-intercept form, you need to solve for y. So the notes, the only hint that I've got for you right here is that just simply means to solve for y. Okay? So that means as I look at each of these problems, I want to isolate y and get it by itself. Okay? So, you're here. What is happening to y? 12x is being added to it, right? How do you undo adding 12x? Subtract it. If you do it to one side, you've got to do it to the other side. Now, that leaves you with y is equal to, remember, I like to write it in the same order every time. I want to put my number with the x out front. So I would get negative 12x first, but then what happens after it? Plus 7, because 7 is positive. That gets me my equation in the correct form. Questions? All right. Now, this next one's going to get me to a spot that I want to be in, all right? Because it's going to allow me to make an extreme point. Again, we want to isolate and solve for y. Well, this time, your y is being multiplied by this negative 6, but then they're having x added to it. So before we can worry about the negative 6, we got to get rid of this x. How do we move it? You subtract it. Even though the whole thing is really subtraction, your x was positive, so to move it, you have to subtract it. So you get negative 6y is equal to negative x plus 6. Now, again, same idea. You want to solve for y. So how do you undo what is happening to the y? You divide. There's no operation there, so when nothing's there, it's really multiplication, so you have to divide. The thing to remember is when you divide that, you've got to divide everything by negative 6. Okay? Now, here's the first big key point I'm going to want to make. 2 negatives being divided will become positive. Here's the second thing. If it is a fraction, leave it. A lot of us today see a fraction, hey, let's make it a decimal because that's what our calculator does. If you make it into a decimal, it is so hard to graph it because you've taken that fraction where you would do rise over run and made it into a decimal. It's hard to see, it's hard to do. Just leave it. So this becomes 1 over 6x, and then a positive and a negative would make a negative. 6 divided by 6 is 1. We're doing division, not addition. Questions? All right, we're almost done. Last little example here. All right, now, number 9 adds another phase to this. When I look at number 9, okay, just like when we simplified the other day, both sides are not simplified as far down as they could be. Isn't that right, Giovanni? Yeah. So we've got to start by taking that 3/4 and doing what? Multiplying. So you've got to take it and distribute it. So this becomes 1 plus 3 because we don't change anything on that side. 3/4 times x becomes 3/4 x. Now, this next one would be hard, right? You'd have to be really good to kind of figure this out. I encourage you to use your calculator to help you figure out what 3/4 times 4 is. So you would want to do 3/4, so in parentheses, 3 divided by 4 times 4. And if you work that out, you should get the number 3. Do you want to see the math behind that on how it would work? I can work it off to the side. Perfect. So if you had that, it would be 3/4 times 4. The issue is you can't multiply a fraction by a whole number. So you make this a fraction by putting it over 1. Then you multiply across the top and then across the bottom. 3 times 4 becomes 12 over 4 times 1, which is 4. 12 divided by 4 becomes the number 3. That is how I got this to be a 3. Now, there are other tricks, but I'm not interested in showing them to you yet because those don't always work. So now I'm right here. I'm almost to what I need to be in slope-intercept form, except I need to get y by itself. So what do I have to do? Subtract 3. Now, here's the thing to remember. When you add or subtract, you don't have to do it to each individual piece. You just have to do it to each side. Division and multiplication are the ones that could be different. All right? But when this happens, that will cancel. Y is equal to 3/4 x. 3 minus 3 becomes 0. So you could leave it like this, or I'm going to be honest, you don't have to write the plus 0. So it could just be y is equal to 3/4 x. Either one of those would work. Okay? Questions? All right. Here's the deal, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you. I'm about to give you a practice sheet. Very similar to this notes. A few more problems, but it's practicing, making sure we're good. The thing to notice about, especially if you're at home, what do you notice is on Thursday? Quiz. Okay? It'll be a quiz over basically function or no function, slope, and then slope-intercept form. All right? That's where we're going to be at. That's what we're going to do. All right? I will pass those notes out to you. Ready, set,